This is The Clash, where the real world clashes with a true Christian worldview. Join former professional wrestler Chris Whaley, known as the Masked Saint, who is an author, pastor, and teacher that brings his wrestling skills into the squared circle and tackles real-life issues. Along with Jeff Dixon, best-selling author, internationally known teacher, leader, and pastor who is not afraid to tackle the tough issues of the world we live in. Together they form a tag team of wisdom in The Clash.
Hi, welcome to The Clash, where we take a Christian worldview and allow it to clash into the world and the culture around us. If we do it well, we're going to entertain you just a little bit, we're going to educate you about a few things, and even encourage you in your journey of faith as you strive to be the person that God created you to be. I'm Jeff Dixon. I'm one of the hosts of this wild and woolly show, but the real host of the show is sitting next to me. It is Chris Whaley, former professional wrestler, pastor extraordinaire. You also may know him as the Saint. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Jeff, I'm doing great. Just, an exciting time. We had a wonderful opportunity to get part of Patrick Moody's story. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to get to hear more of that story. Patrick was an actor. He was in 5 Burt Reynolds movies. Did a lot of other work. He was the stage manager for the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater. Eventually became a pastor, which was his calling. And he's just got some great stories to share with us. And you're going to particularly enjoy some of those that we have today. So let's go back to that interview.
Well, what now? So you've done both. Which is tougher? Is it tougher being an actor trying to make it in Hollywood, or is it tougher being a pastor in a Southern Baptist church?
That is an excellent question, Jeff. That is an excellent question. My goodness. On the one hand, the Hollywood, there are times when you feel so alone and you feel as if nobody cares. I was a good friend with Lucy Arnaz, Lucille Ball's daughter. And we were out for breakfast one time and I asked her, Lucy, if you were starting an acting class in Hollywood, what would you do? What would it be like? What would your acting class be like? And she said, without batting an eye, she said, the first 6 weeks would be intense psychological training on how to accept rejection. Mm-hmm. No acting classes or anything. I would just tear you down and rebuild you like a Marine at Paris Island to accept rejection, because that's what actors do. They have to accept rejection. So there's a lot of loneliness there. Now, go to the pastors. There's people everywhere, and everybody wants you, and everybody figures you're their best friend, and everybody's, so it's a counter kind of a thing. It's you're not lonely. There are a lot of people, and you're trying to take care of a lot of people and help a lot of people. But it can be extremely crazy, busy, scattered, blissful, joyful, uh, uh, sometimes tough, really tough. So it's I don't know how to answer that question, but that's a good question. Mm-hmm. Both of them have their, when you're on top in Hollywood, there's nothing better. But it's sort of like a roller coaster. Burt had a belt around his, and he loved belt buckles, and he made belt buckles for the crew and everything. But he had a belt, and I was reading it one time, and the belt on the back said, "You're only as good as your last picture." That's what it said. You're only as good as your last picture. So there's elation, but when there's no phone calls, you're just waiting for the phone to call. You're checking in with your agent. Have you had anything? And nope, haven't had anything. So you're trying to figure out what to do. But on the other hand, as pastor, it's everybody's just, everybody figures so it's a shepherd versus, I don't know, lost guy in the wilderness. Yeah. I have no idea.
See, here's a business idea for you. For pastors, you can make a line of belts that say you're only as good as your last sermon.
Hey, you're absolutely right.
We can
That's
do
a,
that.
take that and run with it, Jeff.
I'll do that in my free time.
Yeah, you only good as your last sermon.
Yeah.
That's
I
it.
like
Perfect,
that.
right?
Same thing. Same thing.
I'd like to believe that Patrick has had an influence on, different lives there in Hollywood during his time there. But one of them I know that he made a difference in his life is a guy named Judge Reinhold.
Hmm.
Judge Reinhold was in Fast Times at
Beverly
Ridgemont
Hills Cop.
High. Matter of fact, he was living on your couch, was he not, whenever he got that?
Yeah. Judge, when I lived in Florida, Judge and I met each other doing a play called The Death and Life of Sneaky Fitch, which is a Western spoof musical. And I played the narrator, and Judge played the part of Rackham, the bad guy. And so we got to be good friends. And so then I left for Hollywood, and I'd been out there for, I don't know, 6 months or so, beating the boards. And I get a phone call, and it's Judge. And he said, I am going crazy here in Port Salerno, Florida. That's where we worked in a dinner theater there called the Port Salerno Dinner Theater. He said, I'm going crazy. There's nothing going on in Port Salerno. And I said, well, why don't you come to Hollywood? You got nothing to lose. And 3 weeks later, I get a knock on my door, and there he is. And he's driven his little Datsun truck all the way across the country. And he proceeded to spend the next 6 months on my couch, did not pay rent. We both were starving actors together, but it built a bond and friendship. And so we were roommates. He finally wired his mother and said, I got to pay this guy some rent. And she sent him some money, and he proceeded to go out and buy me a guitar, which I still have. But we've been friends through the years. We separated ways a little later, and we didn't see each other. And then I had a friend who called me, who was working at Disney, and said, I have an old friend here of yours that I'm working with. His name's Judge Reinhold. And he reconnected us. And Judge had found the Lord.
Wow.
Judge was he was full of himself in the early 80s. And there was a girl on the set that he wanted to date. He wanted to take her out. And he asked her you want to go out? And she said, no. And he said, oh, okay. So he asked her again, you want to go out? I'll take you out. She said, no. And he asked her a third time, and he finally said, I'm Judge Reinhold. Come on. Fast Times. I'm, the Eddie Murphy movies, Beverly Hills Cop, And she said, look, I know who you are. We've been working together on this set, but I'm a believer. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. And I just really don't have is no interest that I have. So I appreciate, the invitation or whatever. And he went back again, and he asked her again. And she said, I'll tell you what, if you'll go to church with me, uh, then we'll go out afterwards and have lunch. How's that? And he thought, okay, well, this is halfway to first base, so I'll give it a shot. So he went with the girl to Easter Sunday service at a church on the way. Pastor Jack Hayford,
Mm-hmm.
who was a dynamic, powerful, foursquare, charismatic preacher, but just in the word, solid. And the Holy Spirit just hit Judge upside the head. And soon he forgot about the girl, but he embraced Jesus Christ.
Mm.
And I had the opportunity years later. He had been baptized, but he came down here, and I had the opportunity of baptizing him in the ocean for a second time a few years ago. And he's a good friend. He lives in Arkansas now. He lives in Arkansas. He collects the residuals and lives a happy life, does some voiceovers and this and that's. Great guy, wonderful guy. I love Judge. Good man.
Well, I got to ask you this. I got to ask you, and hope you don't mind saying something about it, but you did Burt Reynolds' funeral.
Yeah.
And I know if you don't mind, just share with us how you were struggling with that, and then
Yeah.
that
Yep.
story that I'm talking about.
Yep. I had been serving at Village Baptist Church. Burt passed away in September of 2018. It was a shock. Everybody was in shock, and everybody was wondering, is there going to be a funeral? And so what happened was we started to communicate with Family Church, West Palm Beach, Florida, and there had been no word whatsoever about a funeral. There was no announcement, but they asked me to officiate at the funeral. Now, I had worked with Burt Reynolds for 7 years, and as I've shared with you, he was a great guy. He was a wonderful guy. There were times when he made allusions to his spiritual walk with veil type things like the man upstairs, et cetera, et cetera. And he walked the walk, it seemed, but I never knew for sure. So as a pastor, and Chris can tell you this, when you do a believer's funeral, that's one thing, because we know where they've gone. When you do a non-believer's funeral, that's another thing. And it's tougher. So I was conflicted because I didn't know where Bert's spiritual walk was. So I was in agony because I am not going to stand in the pulpit and say that silly thing of, oh, he's up there with Dom DeLuise and Charles Nelson Riley and all these other buddies, and they're having the best. That is not biblical, as we all know. And I'm not going to lie from the pulpit and make up something in front of mostly unbelieving people to make them feel good and tickle their ears so they can all walk away feeling good. I'm not. So I was deeply conflicted inside my heart, and I was praying, Lord, help me with this. I want to be a witness to these people, but I can't say if I don't know. And I'm not a person who hears voices, but while I was in the midst of this, in the middle of the night, I heard a voice that said, call Bobby Bowden. Now, Bobby Bowden and Burt Reynolds were like this. They were buddies, they were friends. And of course, if you know anything about Bobby Bowden would witness to a wooden Indian. Bobby Bowden would witness to a seagull. Bobby Bowden loved the Lord and was witnessing all the time to everybody and anybody. And I had been with my wife and my dad to Burt Reynolds' 80th birthday, which was held at his house in Hobe Sound, Florida. And Leo Corsi was there, Bobby Bowden was there, some other celebs were there. It was kind of a private thing, but it was really, really nice. And so I had talked to Bobby Bowden. Of course, we talked to Burt and everybody else. And then my dad and my wife, we all got home and went home. And there was just a few people left when we left. One of them was Bobby Bowden. So back to my conflicted situation with the funeral, I hear this voice that says, call Bobby Bowden. So I called Burt's assistant, who was scrambling to get the funeral arrangements and trying to hold off publicists and press and everybody else. And I said, I have to get in touch with Bobby Bowden. And so he said, I'll call up there and someone will call you from Coach Bowden's office. And so the lady called, her name was Sue, and she said, okay, yeah, we'll set it up. Excuse me. And so I called Bobby Bowden. I said, Coach, uh, I, I, I had met him once before. I reignited his memory as to who I was. I said, we were at Bert's wedding, excuse me, Bert's birthday, 80th birthday. And you were there. It's, oh, yeah, it was great. Yeah, I met you. I met your dad, met your wife. You was great, blah, 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 blah. And I said, Coach, I got to ask you a question. If you know this answer, you would be the one who would know. Did Burt ever receive Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior? And without a second, Bobby Bowden said, oh, yeah, it was at the birthday. You guys had already left. And I said, really? Tell me about this. Please tell me. He said, everybody had gone. I was sitting there next to Burt. Everyone had left. And I turned to Burt and I said, Burt, this is Bowden talking, but he's telling me, he said, Burt, God has been very good to you, and God has been very gracious to you. And you're 80 years old now. You need to get right with God by receiving Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And he led him through the Roman road, and he led him through the sinner's prayer. And Bowden told me, he said, when he finished with the sinner's prayer and he said, amen, he looked up at Burt, and Burt had tears coming down his eyes. He said, Burt said, it feels like 1,000 pounds have been lifted off my shoulders. Mm. Thank you so much. And it was like a massive relief for him. And so Bowden told me, he said, oh, yes, he received Jesus Christ on that night. I think it was like September, whatever, his birthday, whatever his birthday is in September. And his 80th birthday. So I shared that story. But before I shared that story, I don't know if we've got the time for this. I'll be quick. Going back, my father witnessed to Burt Reynolds. My dad had a sailboat. It was called Sailbad the Sinner. And he would take people out on the boat. And he took Burt out into the ocean. And they were sailing along in Sailbad the Sinner. And Dad started to witness to Burt. And this was the 60s, late 60s. And Burt said to Dad, Jess, I'm not ready for that yet. Please don't talk about that yet anymore. I don't want to hear that. So Dad stopped. They finally came about, and they were going through the Palm Beach Inlet, heading back, and Dad opened up again and started witnessing. And Burt said, I told you, Jess, I'm not ready for that yet. Stop this. If you don't stop witnessing to me like this, I'm going to jump off this boat. So they went a little farther, got into the intercoastal waterway, and Dad started again. And Burt looked at him and said, I told you. He jumped off the boat, swam to the seawall, and walked home. He said, I told you. And I'm reminded, what is the verse where it said, some follow Apollo, some follow Paul. Well, this was an Apollo-Paul situation. Some water, Yeah. Dad worked hard, but it was through all of that planting of the word in Burt's heart and the relationships with my dad, with myself, and some other people, to the point where it was the right time on his 80th birthday that Burt Reynolds received Jesus Christ. I have no doubt where he is. He's in heaven. And so at that funeral, I shared that with those people. And a lot of them were dressed in black. And that told you exactly where they were in regard to their spiritual life. You can tell when a believer goes to heaven and there's a congregation of believers, they're happy because they know where he went. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you can tell with lost people because they're all wearing black and gloomy and sad and dour. And it was the latter for Burt's funeral. But I witnessed to him and I said, if any of you all want the promise of heaven and what Burt has now, because Burt is now looking in the face of Jesus, face to face, then come and talk to me afterwards. And there was a second funeral. It was a very private funeral. This one had about 300-400 people in it, but there was more private people where a lot of Hollywood people came in. And I was at that funeral afterwards as well. And they had a sharing time. And Bobby Bowden stood up and he told exactly the same story that I shared with you. Mm. So, yes, Burt Reynolds became a believer. Wow. In the latter, 2 years later, he passed away. Mm. So that's the story there of Burt Reynolds. And he did receive Jesus Christ. Wow. And anybody who's watching this, you need to get right with God. You need to do what Burt Reynolds did, and millions of others have done, to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Say yes to him. Ask for forgiveness. He will forgive you, and he will cleanse you, and he will set you right on the path to heaven. Yeah. And thank you for the opportunity to give that witness, guys.
You got anything else? I got one more thing.
I'll let you do your thing. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, because any question I would ask after that really just kind of tanks what we're doing here. I mean, because again, I mean, that is
everything pales. Everything pales in comparison
It
to
does.
that.
It really
That's the
does. I
thing.
mean, it doesn't matter where
It's
you've
just
been or who you
Hollywood and
know.
all the other stuff.
You got to know Jesus,
It's
right?
that's it.
Well,
Jesus. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When it comes to our last breath, it's all about Jesus.
Yeah, it is.
Everything else
Well-
is, nothing.
Yeah.
well, I got to tell the story. There was
Okay.
a young man never, ever planning to go to college, never. In his wildest dreams, he never planned to go to college. He majored in lunch in high school, met a young lady who was a Christian, and she knew what she was going to do. She said, I've lived in poverty all my life, and I'm not going to live the rest of my life in poverty. I'm going to get an education. I'm going to be a high school math teacher, and I'm going to serve God doing that. And this young man decided to follow her down to that Christian college that she went to, and she took him to the First Baptist Church of West Palm Beach. And, he can remember the very first time he went in there and he sat in those pews and he heard a guy named Jeff Moody preaching. And this story's about me because that was me. I mean, I was the son of a Jehovah's Witness mother and a long-distance truck driving dad, and just had an unbelievable childhood growing up. But I'll never forget sitting in that church and hearing Jeff Moody preach. For the first time in my life, I actually understood what the preacher was saying. And so Dr. Jeff Moody is the one that led Chris Whaley to the Lord. And he's the greatest hero of my life, of physical human beings. Jesus is my hero, but under Jesus, your dad is the one that made the greatest impact on my life. And I can never thank him enough. And so it's great for me because he's going to be with Jesus. We just celebrated his 100th birthday last week.
Yes.
Well, I don't know when this film is going to come out, but anyway, it was then. We celebrated his 100th birthday.
August 19th.
He started Palm Beach Atlantic University. When my wife and I were students there were probably almost 300 students. And then this year they have 1,000 freshmen. And it's just
huge.
incredible.
It's huge.
What
almost 5,000 students.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's incredible that your dad is the guy that started that. And that's a legacy that is going to live long after you're gone, after I'm gone.
Yep.
And I can just never thank him enough. And it is a great, great honor to be your friend. And thank you so much for giving your time.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. It's been great sharing, going down memory lane a little bit. And I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate the work that you're doing, the outreach that you're doing, and keep it up.
All right.
It's good work.
We'll do it. Thank you for the journey that we've been on today, and may God bless you here in the days ahead. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point here.
Yes,
and
we will.
And
We'll catch up.
And on a personal, thanks for taking care of this guy. I mean, thanks for keeping
I
an eye
didn't
on
take care of
him.
him. He took care of me.
Somebody's got to keep him out of trouble. So so an incredible legacy though.
He kept me
thank
out
you
of
so
trouble.
much.
He kept me out of trouble. It's been a blessing, guys. Thank you.
Right. Love you, buddy. Take care.
Be blessed.
Sometimes you hear some things that are very powerful and they will stick with you and you're going to remember them. And in this episode, you have probably heard a chapter out of the life of Burt Reynolds that you probably didn't know until today. And you know some of the ways that God moves the right people into place to make that happen. There's so many amazing lessons in that, Chris, where we're interconnected and how God uses each one of us to nudge us toward the kingdom and do what we're created to do. And so I've had a great time. So thank you for introducing us to your friend.
Yeah.
But we are out of time in this episode. So what do we need to do?
Well, when you're all out of time, you just remember this: don't tap out.
was a good time working with all those great people. Dom DeLuise, another one, very, very funny man, very funny guy, always joking and um, as they say, in one, which means you're at the edge of the stage, and you're always performing. I saw him in a hotel lobby, just suddenly start doing performance, and people were stopping and watching him and laughing, and he was very, very funny man, Dom
Yeah.
DeLuise, and his wife Carol, who was Dom was in Blazing Saddles, and a lot of people don't know Carol DeLuise was in Blazing Saddles as well. She was one of the townsfolk, but he was a great guy, and there were a lot of different people, like Strother Martin, a famous, and Strother Martin I mean, the name is not as familiar to you possibly, but this line, which is a part of Hollywood lore, was Strother Martin in Cool Hand Luke when he said, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." That was Strother Martin.
Uh-huh.
And Strother Martin knew more Irish limericks than anybody else I'd ever heard. He could just, and I had a scene with him in the end where I played a husband who was trying to admit his father into an insane asylum, and Burt and Dom DeLuise are in a truck, and they come whizzing by as I am pushing my father not my father, but the actor whose name was Jocko Mahoney, who was the father of Sally Fields.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
And
wow.
Jocko Mahoney's in a wheelchair, and Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise come by in a truck, and they force us off the road, and we're going over a bridge, and so my father character falls into the water there. And it was Jocko Mahoney, who was a famous stuntman from the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Wow.
So
Oh, wow.
Right.
yeah.
Well, what was Jackie Gleason like?
Oh. Jackie Gleason was one of the most talented people I've ever met in so many ways. But Jackie Gleason, honestly, as a human being, was not a very nice person, sadly. A lot of people, you hear these things about the comedians who are whatever. He had a very short fuse. Um, he drank a lot. He drank a lot. He would start in the morning with Coors beer at about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And by 2 o'clock, he'd go to straight scotch. And if you did not get your scene in with him by 3:30, you weren't going to get it. And the scene I had with Jackie Gleason in Smokey and the Bandit was slated for 3:15 in the afternoon. And around 3:20, I started getting nervous. We did one take, and we needed to do a second one, and I'm getting nervous. And the director's Hal Needham was getting nervous because we all knew Jackie's time clock was ticking, and it wasn't very long. But yeah, he was on the positive side. A lot of the things that you see in Smokey the Bandit that deal with the sheriff, for example, the toilet paper coming out of the Jackie thought that out. He said, "Leave it to me. I'm going to do something here." He put that toilet paper in his boot and came walking out. When he was going to go eat the hamburger, and he had the toilet paper. A lot of the things that are the funny things about the sheriff, Jackie thought that up, and he was such a dominant. I don't want to say dominating figure, but he was such a larger than life person to everyone that Hal Needham just let him go and let him do whatever he wanted to do. And to his credit, if you watch Smoking the Bandit 2, he played, I think, 5 characters. He played the sheriff, and then the sheriff's 4 brothers or cousins. One was a Canadian Mountie. One was a little bit not on the heterosexual side. How's that to put it? Uh, he played a lot of different characters in Smokey the Bandit 2, and they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
that's
fun to
great.
watch.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Jeff.